Everybody, welcome to the live signing. I'm Bret Baier, and my buddy here, Chris Steyerwalt, is helping us out. Digital politics editor of Fox
Just
News.
Politics, just regular politics.
Well, I mean, you're digital too.
Also, for the
hence,
signing, duh.
Yeah, he's just politics editor. Anyway, this is an intro to the new book that comes out next week, May 15th. 3 days in Moscow, Ronald Reagan and the Fall of the Soviet Empire. And I'm really psyched about it. It's the second book in this series of 3 days. I have to come up with another 3-day.
I was going to say, I know that you cannot possibly ever write about the creation because you can't go to 7 days. You only work in 3-day increments.
But 3 days in January, obviously the Dwight Eisenhower final mission was a real big success, thanks to you. I think you're really going to like 3 days in Moscow. It's about the final summit in Moscow between Ronald Reagan and Mikhail Gorbachev, and an overlooked speech to students at Moscow State University. So a lot of nuggets that you just didn't know about in this book. And we're going to get to signing and answering your questions. And you can get a book here, just like I'm at your bookstore where you go, or just like you're there.
Yeah, and you won't get tased by security here because you're online. It's totally safe.
So our moderator-in-chief here, Chris Steyerwalt, is taking over.
So what I find interesting here, a couple of things I just got this and I've only started plowing through it. But one of the first things that struck me, much like in your first book, and I guess this is not surprising, you were a White House correspondent, you were a Pentagon correspondent, the repertorial approach that you take. It feels like a ripped from the headlines, you write it in an immersive journalistic way. Was that intentional, or is that just who you are?
No, I mean it's both things, but it actually was how I approached it. Catherine Whitney, worked with her on the first book, worked on this one. We found nuggets of information that is actually just reporting on new stuff that hasn't been out. And with Eisenhower, I didn't really know a lot about Eisenhower. Reagan, I knew a lot more about Reagan. But this particular summit, I went out and I interviewed George Shultz, who, by the way, at 93 years old, can remember meetings like they were yesterday.
Yeah, he's amazing.
So we interviewed him. Oral histories, James Baker, all these figures who are fortunately still around. And they provided really a reporter's look at those 3 days, and then it bounces back and looks how Reagan gets to that point in that moment.
This was not an uncontroversial decision inside this administration and inside this White House to even take this trip, let alone what was on the docket there, right?
Yeah, remember, it's the end of the second term. This is like his final act, and there were advisors inside the White House who were saying, do not do this, because this could be a colossal failure. And Gorbachev could come off smelling like a rose, and we could come up with nothing. And Reagan thought that because of the relationship he had established, because of the kind of predicate that had been laid out in the previous summits, that he could really make some headway. He talked about human rights. He ended up giving a speech at Moscow State University that told those students what America was like what the drive they should be pushing for in the Soviet Union is.
And how much of this visit, we're living now in the aftermath of some failed promises about post-Soviet Russia, right?
Yeah.
The years that followed did not live up to the promises that Reagan spelled out in that speech. Watching, what was his name? Fat and drunken.
Yeltsin.
Watching Boris Yeltsin stagger and stumble his way, and watching the promises of capitalism turn into gangsterism, and we ended up with Vladimir Putin. Do you think that Reagan was maybe a little naive in talking about what a post-communist Russia could look like?
Yeah, he was more idealistic about what they should strive for. They never achieved that, and really fought some of the ideas that he talked about. Interesting you mentioned Vladimir Putin. Part of this, it was the first time Reagan had gone to Moscow after calling it all kinds of names, the
Evil
Soviet
Empire.
Union and the ash heap of history and all of this stuff about communism. and he does this Red Square tour with Gorbachev, which was just a real moment. He's surrounded by all these figures. One of them, believed to be
a tourist, just a tourist standing there with just a camera around his neck, or KGB agent Vladimir Putin,
Mr. Vladimir Putin, and the picture is pretty undeniable that it's him.
Oh yes,
and you know what really I think works in this whole thing is that, like the Ike book, I say kind of how we found this topic, and in the last word, use that to kind of look at this administration and the Trump administration and all the stuff that's going on with Russia now. And I think it does put in some context that even though it's breaking news every day, that you kind of get a different perspective.
The risk for Reagan was pretty intense politically. This was his legacy, and he also had a vice president waiting in the wings to pick up the ball. At this point, the world knew that whether it was glasnost or perestroika, things were going to change. Nobody apprehended at that time how quickly and how thoroughly they would change, but they knew change was coming. One of the things that went against Reagan in this, or that people argued against Reagan, was that if you go, right, you're going to be propping up the regime instead of having it fall. Was that a legitimate concern?
It was. And, you know, he was dealing with Gorbachev to try to get Gorbachev to be more front and center because he was losing power. He was losing his own people inside the communist structure, not the people.
But the Duma was starting to shift away from him.
And the economy was crappy.
Right.
And much like it is now in Russia, if you look at the economy just across the board, you would think Vladimir Putin should not be as strong as he is.
So these are the days of toilet paper shortages. There's not enough stuff in the grocery store. You can't. The people are frustrated and anxious about what's going to happen.
I mean, experts during the time said, you know, listen, when people open up the refrigerator, they don't see perestroika. There's not perestroika in the refrigerator.
Though that is now a brand of vodka in Russia, I'm sure.
But so Gorbachev was hanging on. Reagan didn't want to facilitate that, but he also wanted to push these reforms that they had been talking about, and specifically on human rights. And by doing what he did, saying what he said, that visit, it's seen as one of the final dominoes that leads to the wall coming down.
Absolutely.
And, you know, Bush then takes that mantle and finishes the job.
The time between his speech at the Brandenburg Gate, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall, and his visit to Moscow. You have all of these geopolitical forces at play. You have all of this working. But there's a lot of domestic political concerns for Reagan and his party, one of which was there were Republicans who were saying Reagan was too soft. After the Iceland in the Reykjavik summit,
thought they were losing.
Yeah, he had come under heavy pressure from Republicans who said, you're going soft. And here was Ronald Reagan, the Cold Warrior extraordinaire par excellence, the guy who had been out front on this issue since 1964 or before. And suddenly he's being told that he's soft. How did he deal with that criticism? How did he respond?
So what was amazing about Reagan, and this is, and there are similarities, believe it or not, between Reagan and Trump in the way they talk in big speeches. Like if you look at Poland, the State of the Union, Afghanistan, there's some big speeches where you'll see similar phrases.
And there's a little overlap between the speechwriting worlds of those guys.
Of course, yeah. But the people couldn't be more different as far as Reagan did not care about the press stories, the clips. I mean, the White House may have, been angry about the press coverage, but at the time, Marlon Fitzwater swears to this day that he would say, "Marlon, don't worry. Well, don't worry about that," and he would just keep on doing what he was doing. Like for example, SDI, which was eventually labeled Star Wars. Here domestically, the press was making fun of it. Like it was a cartoon.
Ridiculous.
Like asteroids.
Right.
In the Soviet Union, it was like the key negotiating
Absolutely.
ploy that really flummoxed.
The Soviets believed that it would give the United States first strike ability, because of course the way that the world was kept from being turned into a cinder for about 60 years was a concept called mutually assured destruction. And if either side felt that the other had the ability to conduct a complete first strike, and destroy the military of the other, then it would be out of balance. And that's why the Soviets totally freaked out about SDI. And whether it really worked or not, Reagan didn't care.
He didn't care. It was a concept. And as it was reported here in the U.S., it was almost like reporters were laughing about it. And yet, on the Soviet side, it was really a serious part of the negotiation. So Reagan knew that inherently, and that was like an example of how he didn't listen to all of the reporting on it and just kind of kept on his track.
So for the Gorbachevs, how did they, in terms of, they had already had a visit to Washington. Which
was very well received.
Enormously well received. He was the first premier to not look like he was wearing a potato sack for a suit. His wife was dressed in the fashionable Western style. In terms
Who
of,
was always competing with Nancy Reagan.
Never try to compete with Nancy Reagan. Never try to compete with Nancy
Raisa
Reagan.
and Nancy had a little icy relationship.
How did, in terms of their trying to put on this event, for the Gorbachevs and for the very anxious administration in Moscow, how did they receive the Reagans?
So they received them cautiously. They didn't know what they didn't know about the Reagans, and rightfully so, because as the Gorbachevs went to Washington, one of the big moments was on Connecticut Avenue, where on the way to the White House, Gorbachev gets out and just sees the lunch crowd in the cafes on the sides of the streets and just walks up to them. And there are these television images that Reagan is watching in the White House as Gorbachev in his city in D.C. is like getting mobbed by people yelling "Gorby, Gorby" and shaking hands and with the lunch crowd. Well, Reagan then goes to Moscow, and Nancy Reagan comes up with this idea to do essentially the same thing, to go into the square there where they are just outside the where they were staying, the Spaso House, and climb up on a fruit cart. And all these people come out and they're cheering Reagan, 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 and they had the same moment. Now it got pretty hairy because the Russian or Soviet secret police essentially came out and kind of started hammering people and beating them back.
Exactly.
And the press corps was in part of the crowd, and Helen Thomas got taken out by some guy, and Nancy Reagan grabs her arm and pulls her in and says, "Helen, come in here," and get her in, and they all go into the Spaso house, and Nancy Reagan turns to Marlon Fitzwater and she says, "Well, how did you think that went?" And Marlon Fitzwater turns to her and says, "Well, we just lost our last effort to lose Helen Thomas."
Presidents had been trying for decades already at that point.
But it was a moment, and they used it. And so that was how unpredictable they were.
Talk about your process a little bit. When you wrapped up and I'm not just saying this because I'm trying to finish a book. When you wrapped up your previous Ike book, was this the book that you had in mind right away? Did you already know?
Yeah, so I wanted to get another overlooked speech, another consequential presidential moment that maybe wasn't on the forefront of people's minds.
And I also note, at a hinge point, at a transition point in history.
Right. So Ike was during the Cold War, in the heat of the Cold War, if you will. Reagan wraps up the Cold War. If I had to guess, I'm probably going to do something at the beginning of the Cold War.
You feel it? You're going to go back?
I feel it. I'm going to go back like a Star Wars
I could see that, like a prequel.
So I knew I had an idea. And then we went out to the Reagan Library, and they were super helpful. And then the oral histories at the University of Virginia, which spectacular.
Enormous resource.
Really, and there were just nuggets. I talked to Secret Service agents who were on the trip. I talked to Chris Wallace, who was on the trip.
Oh, was he?
Yeah.
Oh, fantastic.
And so he's in the book, and Andrea Mitchell and others, and George Shultz. And I came up with a lot of stuff that just hadn't been noted about it, and then used that to bounce back to Reagan's life about how he gets there and why he's the leader, much like Eisenhower, that in retrospect people look at and say,
oh, wow.
Where's that guy?
Well, and also a lot of it has to do with as you were talking about, not being consumed by your moment and understanding your place in history.
Yeah.
Feeling not being so full of yourself that you can't function, but an awareness of your moment in your place in time. And I think Reagan certainly had that.
He definitely had that. And you remember, at the end of his term, he's dealing with Iran-Contra.
Oh, yeah.
And there's major problems.
George H.W. Bush is a wimp. Iran-Contra is a mess. And his approval ratings have started to tack down, and people are ready for something new.
Yeah.
Fortunately for Bush, the Democrats ran Michael Dukakis. Sorry, Professor Dukakis.
Yeah.
But it was not altogether certain that Reagan's legacy was going to be what it turned into.
That's exactly right.
If you could have told Ted Kennedy at this moment in history,
right,
Ronald Reagan will be remembered as one of the finest, best presidents. He will be beloved by Americans who say, no, this is not going to happen. This is not going to happen. For people who are of our generation,
yeah,
this period of time, I was in high school.
Yep.
The fall of the Berlin Wall. When you talk to younger readers, when you're writing this and you're thinking about younger readers, the world is so dramatically different in a post-1991, post-1992 era.
Right.
The world is so astonishingly different. What do you think the major difference in terms of the American experience, the arc of history, how things are in world affairs? What's the difference before and after this time?
Yeah. So, I mean, that's a big question. I think it's now, today, it moves a lot faster.
Yep.
Information flies around the world faster than leaders can even make a decision. Before they make a decision, information has gone around the world, and
Yep.
they get it back on Twitter saying that's such a stupid idea, whatever, and you haven't even made the decision
Right.
yet.
It's like, well, we were just thinking about it. I don't know.
It's just throwing it out there. But so it's a lot faster. Social media and our connectivity has changed.
Were we lucky to a certain extent to have a Cold War construct? It simplified. It made things simpler.
Simple.
Right?
It made it
now
simple.
it's chaotic around the world. It's chaotic. Competing interest groups without the sort of unifying philosophical or ideological construct. With the United States made a lot of hard foreign policy questions that were, in hindsight, some of them not so awesome, Saddam Hussein,
Right.
Based on this construct. We got to do whatever it takes to keep the Soviets in check. We don't have that anymore.
No, that's true. And what it also talked about was relationships. You know, like presidents again and again tried to reach out to the Soviets and tried to establish a different relationship, tried to break through. Eisenhower tried to do it with Khrushchev, and a U-2 spy plane crashes.
And Khrushchev almost got there. He almost got there.
Toured the U.S.
Yeah,
He was with the grandchildren. I mean, the whole deal. Reagan was going to go down that road, but was getting nothing from Russian Soviet leaders.
Well, they kept dying on him.
They kept dying on him. But they were just really crackety old communists.
Yeah.
Now he sees this moment in this leader, in Gorbachev, and you had to seize that moment. He had to seize that moment, despite the fact that his anti-communist friends were saying, "What are you doing?
Yeah.
You know, why are you even talking to them?"
Right.
But he saw the upside.
And one of the things, in what I've read so far that comes through, you certainly get the part of Reagan was that he was not an anti-communist for the sake of being against communism. He was not a cold warrior for the sake of the war. He really wanted to end the threat of nuclear war. He really wanted to bring about peace. He was an idealist.
He was. And actually, the dedication is on the book that is on the page that I'm signing for all these books. And it says, "To my sons, Paul and Daniel, and their generation, that they might inherit the legacy of peace that Reagan envisioned."
Yeah.
And he really believed that what he was doing, sticking to those principles, was going to eventually lead the world to a peaceful place. He didn't know when, but he was fighting that battle.
Fighting that battle. Did you make good use of his diaries, I assume?
Yes. It was chock full. I mean, and he was a prolific writer.
Yeah.
As was Eisenhower. And so it's just his own words reflecting on moments were just perfect.
It's amazingly useful to be able to understand somebody that he's keeping it day by day. This is what it was like today. This is how we felt about it today.
Yeah.
So you don't have to rely on a secondhand account. It seemed like he felt this way.
Yeah.
He said, yeah, I was disappointed today. It didn't work out that way. And he writes in a very spare, straightforward, Midwestern way. It's totally accessible.
Yeah. And so this is written, I mean, almost identically to the 3 Days in January in that kind of same voice, where it's in a narrative voice. I think it's very readable, and that you get out of it and you get in the moment, but it's very readable, getting to that point. And it starts with how I found Reagan, and I was the president of Student Council of Marist School in Atlanta, and I went to the Rose Garden to accept an award for our school, and President Reagan was presenting it.
I love this story.
Then Secretary of Education Bill Bennett. And the Rose Garden education ceremony is happening. I'm very proud of our school. The thing goes off, and then right afterwards, as Reagan's walking out, Sam Donaldson with ABC yells, "Mr. President, will the nomination of Robert Bork get out of committee? It's going to die in committee, we're told." And Reagan turns and says, "Over my dead body." And I am so pissed that a reporter has interrupted
How dare he?
this education event that I go back to my high school paper and I write an op-ed. I was the sports editor at the time. And I write an op-ed
Whenever
in the news page.
whenever the sports editor wants to get on the editorial page, it's a
Don't let him
bad
do it.
sign. Don't let him
and
go.
I say, press needs etiquette. It wasn't his event. They had plenty of opportunities to ask questions, and this guy was over the top. And so I write in the open that, you fast forward 22 years from there, and Chief White House correspondent Bret Baier is yelling questions at George W. Bush about the Iraq War or confirmation hearings in that same Rose Garden. And then you fast forward a little bit more, and I have former Education Secretary Bill Bennett on the special report panel talking about Donald Trump.
And you were like, isn't Sam Donaldson really a jerk, though? Really?
Let's
go back to that. Did you meet Reagan then?
I did. And, he was just a larger-than-life figure at that moment in time. And little did I know I'd be writing about something that just a few months later would be happening.
It's a very cool thing. It's a very cool thing to have a front row seat to history, isn't it?
Yeah.
All right. Should we ask some questions from the internet?
Let's do it.
All right,
it's dangerous, but let's do it.
John from Frewsburg, New York. We accidentally just answered your question. Yes, Bret Baier did meet Ronald Reagan.
Yes.
Connie from Conyers, Georgia would like to know how you think President Reagan has influenced President Trump.
So we mentioned it a little bit in that if you look at some of the speeches, particularly the speech in Warsaw, it is very Reagan-esque. And that's not, in the coverage of the Trump administration, you don't often hear Reagan-esque. But that speech in particular was something that you could hear Ronald Reagan say.
Sure. And I think it was probably a very intentional echoing of that, probably trying to a revival.
The speech that he gave in Riyadh in Saudi Arabia to Arab leaders. Oh, slow down.
Slow down.
Oh, got it. I was
was-
like, the speech that he... No.
Buffering.
Got it.
Buffering.
The speech that he gave in Riyadh, I think, was also echoed a lot of Reagan. Now, he's an outsider. He's a businessman. He is, people at the time called him, crazy.
Yep, trigger happy.
Trigger happy. This actor.
Senile.
It was a little bit different in that he had been governor of California, but he was also the head of the Screen Actors Guild and, had a lot of pushback from mainstream media. I think it's different now. It's a little bit more intense. There are a few other extenuating circumstances that are very different than that time. And this president handles it differently. He is a counterpuncher as opposed to Reagan, who kind of, as I mentioned with Marlon Fitzwater, said, well, don't listen to that.
And was a nice guy. Reagan was he certainly was tough when he needed to be tough, but he disarmed his critics with kindness very often.
And humor.
Yeah.
And humor.
Self-effacing.
Donald Trump can be very funny. He's just not usually self-effacing,
Right.
but he can be really funny.
Right, he's you-effacing. He's not self-effacing. Jeff of Livermore, California, wants to know how your son is doing.
Thank you, Jeff. He's doing great. He is in the 4th grade. He is playing flag football and golf. Fortunately, golf is still on the agenda.
Yeah, you got to just keep working it in. With golf, you just have to keep slipping it back in.
But he's into it. And he's the tallest kid in his class, and he is the president of student council of 4th grade.
I look forward to his op-ed that he writes denouncing. He'll be denouncing John Roberts. Yeah. How dare you? We talked about this a little bit, but Mark from Dallas wants to know about how you compare relations between the American and Russian leaders now versus 30 years ago.
So I think that there was this massive distrust, and every president, really, since Eisenhower, tried to do their own version of a reset, right?
Right.
To say, okay, we know you guys are enemies, really,
Right.
but let's reset.
Right.
Hillary Clinton had the button. You had Eisenhower. You had détente was a big,
And
Jimmy Carter.
And Nixon, by the way, had some success in that way. He was able to chill out for a minute and try to rebalance things.
Yes. And Reagan said no to that policy.
Right.
Because we're not getting anywhere with it. We got to go hard line and stick to our principles. And eventually he found the leader that he could deal with. So I think the relations now are much different. I mean, obviously Russia has been implicated in attacking the U.S. In the U.S. elections. They've, by the way, done that for many, many years. They've tried to influence our elections and our country in one way or another.
We got worse at resisting it.
Worse at resisting it, and it's become more technologically advanced. And so I don't think that the relations are great, and I think that this president wants to do his own reset for one reason or another. But I don't think that you're looking at a Reagan-Gorbachev moment anytime soon.
And Russian history is a lot about pride and a sense of wounded pride.
Yeah.
Many centuries of wounded pride. And for Putin, the desire to return to the concept of a great Russia, a Russian empire again, was informed a lot by this time, because his message to the Russian people is, we were humiliated by the West.
When we're weak, we lose.
That's right. So we have to be strong, and that's how he keeps controlling state media also helps. Putting your opponents in prison also helps.
Right.
But American politicians, we're not giving you any ideas. But being able to say we share this common enemy, and for the sake of unity and for the sake of pride, we've got to go against it. That's comes
now
from this moment.
remember the movies at the time. Rocky V, Drago.
Rocky
Four.
Whoa.
Drago. Don't
now you're in my
don't go
expert
crazy.
lane.
All right,
Okay,
all
all
right.
right.
Rocky IV. That's the one with Drago, right?
Yes, I must break you.
Yes, and they've got the Politburo guys up
Yes,
there, and they're
shocked.
Yes.
And then at the end, Sylvester Stallone, Rocky gives the speech, "Can we all just be people and love each other?"
And then the crowd goes crazy for the U.S. guy.
Yes, and Ruskies and all sort. The idea of breaking through the frozen heart of the implacable Soviets was a big theme, and people thought that they could do it.
Yeah. So, is there going to be a moment? There likely will be a summit sometime, but I don't.
That's going to be a doozy. That is going to the Putin-Trump summit is going to be a doozy.
That'll be fun.
How about okay? Bert from Louisville says,
Louisville, pronounced correctly.
how do you maintain such a quote unquote laid back, positive attitude when you're in front of a camera? It's very impressive. How do you do that?
So I always, whenever I got into anchoring, I tried to think of it like I was talking to people sitting on a couch in the living room.
Right.
And that people don't want to be talked down to or like in a funny voice. They want to just be, talked to.
Well, unless it's a really funny voice. If it's a really funny voice, then
like
yes.
the made up, like coming up next.
Yeah.
So I try to think how I would like to see it if I was watching it. So that's how I always have done it.
And Bert, you should know he's a real monster. Rest of the time, he seems nice on TV.
But
real monster.
Totally.
The beatings will continue until morale improves. This is a little insight, but I'm a little curious, and I'm going to add on to it. It's Brian, who is a homeboy of yours. Which professors at DePauw had the biggest effect on you? I wonder if you had Jeff McCall or Ken Bodie. Ken Bodie.
Yeah. So Ken Bodie was a great journalist.
Okay.
NBC. He did PBS. He worked at CNN. At the time, he taught presidential politics. It was
cool.
a class that I absolutely loved, and I worked with him over what was called the winter term. And we worked on a documentary he was doing for CNN at the time. So he was really influential. I did have McCall, who's still there, and he's a great guy, and writes a column for the Indianapolis Star about media. And Steinbrickner was my political science kind of guru. And I saw him last cycle in Iowa. I was at a Des Moines event for some candidate, and in the corner there was my political science professor.
Still legging it out. Absorbing
pure Des Moines politics.
When you love it, you love it.
You're in the heat.
What's your favorite thing about the Reagan Library?
I love that it's open and it sits up on this hill. I love that
it's a beautiful place in the world.
It's just a gorgeous, gorgeous place. I love the place where Nancy and Ron are buried, and it looks out over the mountain, and it's beautiful. So it's like tranquil. I like going out there. I've been there many, many times now, and I recommend if you haven't been to take the trip.
It's totally
because it's just worth the trip.
Yep.
I think the Nixon Library is actually worth the trip. They have a replica of the East Room that is exactly the same as the White House East Room.
And it's California, so the weather's really nice.
Yeah.
What message do you think Reagan would give to those same college students today?
Great question.
They didn't even say who it was. So we can't even thank you.
So I think the message would be similar. You know, Reagan had this ability to deliver a message that was really optimistic. You know, it was future focused, optimistic, shining city on a hill, and talk about not talking down to you. Reagan kind of lifted you up with some of these speeches. He would deliver probably a similar message to try to get to a better place for now Russia, because they never got it.
Yeah, they never got it. And you know, it's interesting. Corruption was a big part of what stole that hope. And it's not to say that Reagan's vision for Russia can't come to pass one day.
Right.
But when things fell apart in part because these ideas got hijacked by gangsters, that as the country opened up, a small cabal of connected, powerful people, Gazprom, what's up, got in there and swooped up all of the benefits.
A lot of money.
So it wasn't unreasonable for people to be frustrated, right? It wasn't unreasonable for Russians to feel like this was not a good plan. Do you think that Russia can be reopened? Can Russia be re-engaged?
I do. I mean, I listen. They're not a positive force in the world currently.
No.
I mean, you look every place they've been. It's got to turn around. But what Reagan would say is you have to confront them, and you have to stand tall, and then, you know, deal with them and negotiate. But you know, first is to say that's unacceptable.
Yeah.
And we'll see, you know, how tough this administration gets. For all the grief about they're not tough enough, they've actually, if you look at the list of things that they've done a lot. I mean, the sanctions, the arming the Ukrainians, the natural gas to Eastern Europe.
Syria.
I mean, they've done quite a bit. It's just that it hasn't been tweeted as much or talked about as much by this president.
Nikki Haley, though, is there to say so.
Yeah.
She is definitely there to say so. You talk both about Reagan and Ike having, quote, small town sensibilities.
Yes.
What does that mean to you?
Well,
and I'm from an actual small town, so I'll be listening here.
Yeah. I think that they just realized they liked the guy next to them. Mm-hmm. And that guy liked them. And there was this sense of values that transitioned from families. And Reagan had a kind of a broken family, but one in which the small town values of where he grew up affected him.
Yeah, and became enormously important. You talk about it takes a village. Ronald Reagan was, after his father fell to pieces, was in a lot of ways raised by the community that he grew up in.
Right, and really valued that. And, I think that affected his thoughts about dealing with people down the road, that inherently there is good in everybody. You just have to get there. And you have to figure out how to get there. He used humor a lot. He used jokes and tried to make people feel comfortable. And, the stories about Tip O'Neill were really great. They would get together. They would battle over issues and policy nonstop. But they'd get together at the White House or someplace, and they'd have drinks and slap each other in the back and tell Irish jokes. And Reagan would say, well, Tip, why can't we be like this all the time? And O'Neill would say, the Speaker of the House, after 6 o'clock, this is great. You're funny. I like you. Before 6 o'clock, it's politics.
Yeah.
And it's hardball politics. So Reagan would call O'Neill up and in the middle of the day, and he'd say, Tip, we really need to get this done. I tell you what, let's take our watches and move them forward to 6 o'clock. And, you'd try to make them laugh. And
you remind me of one of my favorite Reagan jokes, the little boy with the pony. Do you know it? The little boy with the Christmas morning, the boy comes downstairs, and there is only a giant pile of horse manure next to the tree. And he goes out and gets a shovel and is digging away furiously at this pile. And the parents come in and they say, what are you doing? He says, well, with this much horse pucky in here, there's got to be a pony here somewhere. And that is being an optimist.
That's right. How about we read a couple of these?
Hit it.
So I was psyched about these reviews that you can see on the back.
Oh, you got Douglas Brinkley. You're a pretty big deal.
So, of course, I don't have my glasses, but...
Bret Baier's 3 Days in Moscow is a riveting recounting of Ronald Reagan's gallant Cold War diplomacy. This is one of his best, and this is one of the best and most essential books ever written about Reagan. And that's coming from Douglas Brinkley, probably the foremost presidential historian living today, working today.
Yeah, I was psyched by these. I sent them out, and I didn't pay them. Jay Winnick said, 3 Days in Moscow is a remarkable story about one of the most monumental moments in contemporary world history, grand in sweep, brilliantly crafted and riveting. This extraordinary book is also masterfully researched. It will take its place as an instant classic, if not the finest book to date on Ronald Reagan himself.
You got Michael Beschloss, too?
Yes, that's
You're
what I'm
like
saying.
a stud duck. Bret Baier deserves credit for this fascinating, thoughtful, and highly readable account of Ronald Reagan's towering contribution to his country, ending the Cold War without firing a shot. I mean, you got Beschloss and Brinkley both blowing smoke up your skirt. This is a very serious thing.
Brinkley goes on to say every page sparkles. I mean, that's.
Oh, you paid him. You paid him. You stroke checks for this. All right, the magic iPad tells me it's time to play the game of 22 questions in 2 minutes.
Oh my gosh.
Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. Where were you born?
Red Bank, New Jersey.
Okay. Who would you want to play you in a movie?
Pierce Brosnan, a little bit fatter.
Chubby Brosnan.
Chubby
Okay.
Brosnan.
Okay, that's his cousin. What was your first job?
My first job was, let's see. My first job was working as a caddy and a ball retriever at a golf club. My first TV job was in Hilton Head, South Carolina, covering loggerhead sea turtle nesting and what color the azaleas were in the median.
Not bad.
Yeah.
But you also delivered food at this time?
Oh, yeah. I was a bartender and delivered food at the same time.
I love the stories where Bret shows up at somebody's house to deliver their dinner, and they're like, "Hey, I just saw you on the news."
And I said, did you order the calzone?
Did you get the calzone over here? What is your greatest accomplishment?
My family.
Amen.
Yeah.
What is your biggest fear?
Tomorrow's tweet storm?
Tomorrow's
I know.
tweet storm.
I don't know. My
Spiders
biggest
is
fear,
an acceptable answer.
Yeah. No, my biggest fear is not being able to control something that, like an illness or something
Can't
that
protect
you
them.
can't you can't
You
do
can't protect
anything
them.
differently.
Yeah. It's
That's
the
my biggest
The
fear.
worst part about being a dad is when you feel like you just can't. Yeah. You just can't. Who makes you laugh the most? Say your wife.
Yeah, she actually does make me laugh a lot. You're up there. You're a funny guy.
The only reason he asked me to do this is my office is closest to the elevator, but I appreciate that. I will take that.
No, my wife does make me laugh. Her birthday today.
Hey, happy birthday, Amy Bear.
Happy birthday,
Happy birthday, Amy Bear.
She's not watching it.
Definitely not
this.
watching this, but you can say that you did.
Yes.
What is the one thing you need to have in your fridge at all times?
Wow, that is really good. I need to have butter spray.
What?
Yes, it's
I was ready for almost any answer except for that.
yeah, it has to be in because we cook eggs in the morning.
Sure.
And it's what we
So
put
it's
on
like
the bread.
Pam?
Sort of like no, it's butter spray. It's like you can't believe it's not butter.
So it's not butter, but it's a product that tastes like butter and comes in a spray can.
That's right.
And that's your number one thing to have in a
It
refrigerator.
has to be in there.
You're a weirder person. See, he seems very normal, but you're a weirder person inside.
Just telling you.
What
Good
is
breakfast.
What is your favorite adult beverage?
I like tequila on the rocks, the little lime juice.
And pina coladas and getting caught in the rain.
No.
No,
Just straight, and then you sip on it. A little salt is great.
Summer,
As a former bench.
summer is coming.
Yes.
Who is the most interesting person you have met recently?
I thought Don Blankenship was pretty interesting.
He's interesting.
I mean, he's just an interesting character.
Interesting AF. Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. And that's going to be quite a race that they're going to have in West Virginia tomorrow.
Yeah.
That is going to be. It was fun having you in West Virginia, and it was fun to see the way West Virginians responded to us. It was really cool. That was a really cool trip.
Yeah.
What is your middle name?
Brett.
See, haha. That's what you didn't know, Internet.
William Brett. And my confirmation name is Barnabas. So it's William Brett Barnabas Bear. So I could go Billy Brett Barnabas Bear.
Billy Brett Barnabas Bear.
B to the fourth.
B. That's not cube. Whatever.
Yeah.
Journalism, not math.
There would be no math.
What is your biggest pet peeve?
My biggest pet peeve. I don't like anonymous, angry emails or or posts
Right.
that are really, really aggressive, and then when you say, "Well, thanks a lot for the response," they're like, "Oh, I didn't know you would."
I didn't know it was
knew
you.
you would
I thought I
ask."
was just screaming into the void. I thought I was just vomiting my hatred out into space. I had no idea you're a person.
Yeah, the social media etiquette maybe could be stepped up.
Yes. Okay. That's a hundo P. What is your favorite hobby? Duh.
Golf.
What is your guilty pleasure?
Cheese pizza.
I know that also to be
horrible.
true. I know that also to be
It's a
true.
disease.
I had pizza for dinner tonight,
Did
and
you?
I feel ashamed of myself.
Yeah.
It was good though. It had gyro meat on it.
Wow.
It was
Or gyro, either one.
Well, whatever. I'm from West Virginia, so
It's gyro. there.
gyro meat. Okay. Do you have any hidden talents?
I play the piano. I can play 3 songs.
What
really
are your 3
well.
songs?
The Entertainer.
There you go.
And
Desperado for the chicks.
No, Love Lifts Us Up.
Wow, Jennifer Warren.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, very nice.
And what's the third one? Beethoven. So I basically learn 3 songs, and I go to a party, and if there's a piano, I can play the 3 songs.
Oh.
Then I say, you know what?
Actually,
I don't want to.
I'm monopolizing your
time.
time.
I
And
don't-
when they're like, play Fur Elise, and you're like, oh, I gotta
Yeah,
go. I gotta go. What color is your toothbrush?
Blue.
What is your worst habit?
Biting my nails.
I thought you said something else for a second. I'm glad you said nails. What is your favorite thing to cook? Eggs
I do cook eggs in the morning. That's actually what I cook.
with artificial butter spray.
That's true. I do. But it's for the
Have you tried rebutter?
Rebutter?
Real butter?
No.
It's good. Real butter is really good. Comes in a stick. You just cut off a little piece.
I also do grilling. I like to grill.
Okay. Oh, and for Christmas one year, you got everybody special report grill spatulas.
Yes.
So that because you could say you've been grilled by Bret Baier.
Which is what I gave the candidates when they came on the show.
What is the last album or song or artist that you bought or streamed?
Oh my gosh. That I bought or streamed. You know what I just bought?
What?
This is going to sound really bad.
Stand By.
The soundtrack for The Greatest Showman.
Which is hugely popular with my kids.
And me. I saw the movie and I was like, this is a good soundtrack. And I got it, and I like it.
The first track has like an Imagine Dragons kind of like,
yeah, no, it's really good.
All right, I'm not judging you and your chemical eggs. What is the last gift you gave?
I gave my wife some jewelry for her birthday today.
Smart man. Yeah. What cause is dear to your heart?
Children's National.
Get it?
Medical Center. It saved my son Paul, who's had 3 open heart surgeries and 9 angioplasties, and is doing very well.
And is a magnificent institution that I am proud in very small ways to support. And Brett and Amy do amazing things for it, and it's totally worthwhile.
Chris went to a big thing we had down in Naples, Florida, and did a panel discussion where Johnsonville Sausage was the sponsor, and he was very happy about the sponsorship.
Oh, yeah. Though I didn't get to fly in the sausage plane. But then I found out, Dana Perino told me later, it was not actually shaped like a sausage, which I found to be a little bit of a letdown. Name anything on your bucket list.
Anything on my bucket list. So I want to take my kids to around the world. I really want to take my kids to see places while they're young.
Yeah.
And they're still into us. And they're not like all about their
and then
iPad
it's not rusty on the European
friends.
vacation.
Yeah,
exactly.
I want to do that. So we're going to start. We're going to go to France and London this summer.
Very nice.
Yeah, it'll be really cool. And I should point out, by the way, that speaking of kids, there's this book comes out Tuesday. At the same time, an easy reader version of this book comes out at the same time for, your 4th, 5th, 6th.
Put me down for 2. That's great. What a great idea.
So that was the whole purpose of the book to begin with, is to introduce or to reintroduce presidential leadership to, our generation who didn't really know the details and the nuggets, but the next generation who really doesn't know about these presidents.
Yes, this is true. And last question, where do you want to go that you've never been before? And now that you've been to Morgantown, West Virginia, you've got that done.
So I don't know the answer to that question. I've reported from 74.
I was going to say, you've been to Bishkek, so once you've been to Bishkek, it's
74 countries I've reported from. I want to go to the Galapagos.
Okay.
And kind of do the whole thing with the animals.
Turtles.
Yeah. Just chill out in the
Can you fry a turtle egg in chemical butter?
With butter spread?
Yeah, with chemical butter.
Maybe so.
Probably. They're endangered, but potentially delicious.
They have eggs.
Yeah, exactly. Potentially delicious. All right. The Magic iPad says that we're done here.
We're done.
We're done here. Congratulations
Thanks,
on
man.
the book. I'm looking forward to finishing it. Good job.
Thank you very much.
Yeah,
Chris Starwald, everybody.
America.
You can see him every day. With the what's the
halftime
thing
report
that I get?
Halftime report. So good and delicious.
It really is. It gives you all the stuff that you need to know. So if you haven't signed up, halftime report, you can do it on foxnews.com.
Mwah.
Thank you, everybody.